Coming up on this Friday edition of NEWSLINE at noon, as the two Koreas meet for a second day of high-level talks, focus is falling on whether Seoul and Pyongyang will agree to next week's family reunions as planned, while Seoul pushes to conduct its annual military drills with Washington. Visits to Seoul and Beijing by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry this week are being seen as part of Washington's efforts to renew its influence in Northeast Asia in the name of tackling the North Korean nuclear issue. Plus, Korean short track speed skater Hwang Sung-hee wins the bronze medal in the women's 500-meter event at Sochi Olympics, placing Team Korea 13th in the overall standings. These stories and more on NEWSLINE at noon. Thanks for joining us. You're watching NEWSLINE at noon. I'm Choi Yuson in Seoul.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. High-level officials from the two Koreas are meeting again at the truce village of Panmunjom on this Friday for the second time in just 3 days.
North Korea is said to have proposed holding today's meeting that will most likely focus on narrowing the differences of opinion over the upcoming inter-Korean family reunions and the annual South Korea-U.S. joint military exercises.
Yes, and for more, we are going to cross live to our correspondent Hwang Sung-hee at Seoul's Unification Ministry. So, Sung-hee, we have another big day ahead. I'm sure people on both sides of the border are hoping for some progress to be made today. What are we hearing at the moment?
Mark, South Korean Chief Delegate Kim Kyu-hyun and his North Korean counterpart Won Dong-hyun have been locked in negotiations since 10 a.m. this morning, and they should be taking a break now since it is lunchtime here in Korea. Today's talks come after North Korea's proposal that was made yesterday, as the two Koreas failed to reach any tangible outcomes after 14 hours of negotiations on Wednesday. But again, the two Koreas do not have a fixed agenda on what will be discussed at today's talks, although most likely they will pick up where they left off on Wednesday and try to narrow down their differences on the upcoming family reunions, as well as the joint military drills between Seoul and Washington. At issue is North Korea's demand that the South postpone the key resolve and full legal exercises to sometime after the family reunions take place. Now, the event for families separated since the Korean War is scheduled to take place from February 20th to the 25th, and this overlaps with the military drills that begin at the end of the month. Guys?
Well, it sounds like they have quite the difference to bridge over those issues. How likely is it that the two Koreas will reach an agreement at this point, Sung-hee?
Well, Yusun, North Korea says that the family reunions cannot take place simultaneously as the joint military drills, while Seoul maintains a firm stance that humanitarian issues like the family reunions should be dealt with separately as the joint military drills. Now, however, the presidential office of Cheongwade also reiterated this stance earlier this morning that the South will not let the military drills disrupt plans for the family reunions and vice versa. Now, the big question for today is whether the Koreas can reach a compromise. But meanwhile, they are continuing their preparations for the upcoming family reunion. South Korea's Unification Ministry said a 15-member delegation will depart for Mount Kumgang, the site of the reunion, tomorrow. But guys, we must also remember that North Korea has a history of breaking promises, just like we saw the regime walk away from its agreement to resume the reunions last September, just days before the event. Guys?
All right, thank you, Sung-hee, and do keep us updated throughout the day, and let's hope some progress can be made today.
Yes, certainly. That was Hwang Sung-hee with the latest on today's hastily scheduled inter-Korean talks. Now, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry called on South Korea and Japan to iron out their differences on history issues before wrapping up a two-day visit to Seoul.
As part of Washington's efforts to boost its presence in the region, Kerry now heads to Beijing, where he is expected to urge China to take on a greater role in resolving the North Korean nuclear issue. Our Kim Young-gil has more.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said it is up to South Korea and Japan to overcome their differences on matters related to history and forge a more positive relationship before wrapping up a two-day visit to Seoul and heading to Beijing.
So while the United States obviously has a strong interest in the relationship and in the security component of the relationship, it's up to Japan and the Republic of Korea to put history behind them and move the relationship forward.
Relations between Seoul and Tokyo have fractured in recent weeks over Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's visit to the controversial Yasukuni Shrine last December and separate claims to the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island. Kerry also said the ongoing animosity undermines trilateral cooperation between the U.S., South Korea, and Japan in dealing with the provocative North. Kerry also met with President Park Geun-hye and other key officials during his two-day stay and reaffirmed that Seoul and Washington are in agreement when it comes to the denuclearization of North Korea.
Today, we reaffirm our commitment to a common goal, which is the verifiable denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula in a peaceful manner, and we are committed to going to talks only if there is a clarity with respect to the steps that need to be taken for denuclearization by the North.
He also said China can do more now to urge North Korea to begin taking action to come into compliance with its international obligations. This was Kerry's second visit to Seoul and his fifth trip to Asia as the top U.S. diplomat. He travels next to Beijing and will then head to Jakarta before moving on to Abu Dhabi. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
North Korea appears to have accelerated excavation at its nuclear bomb testing site in the northeast of the country, but a test isn't believed to be imminent. Referring to its new satellite images, the U.S. Korea Institute at Johns Hopkins University says North Korea likely started work last May on a new tunnel at its Punggye-ri site, where it has conducted its 3 previous nuclear tests, the most recent being in February 2013. The Institute estimates the pile of earth excavated from the tunnel has doubled just in the last few weeks. The Institute adds it's unlikely Pyongyang intends to use this tunnel for its next nuclear test, since 2 other tunnels at the site appear to be complete. Now, a 3-month suspension of business at the 3 leading credit card companies hit by the worst data leak in South Korea's history starts next Monday, amid efforts by financial regulators to better protect the public's personal information. Kwon So-ah has the details.
3 months of not doing business. That's the punishment KB Gukmin Card, NH Nongyap Card, and Lotte Card will get for their involvement in the biggest personal data leak in Korean history. The Financial Supervisory Service said Friday a proposed suspension of business at the 3 companies will start Monday and continue to May 16th. The main focus of the suspension is on preventing the companies from taking on new customers. The firms will also be banned from providing credit card loans and cash advances to new contractors. Existing customers, however, won't feel the effects of the ban as they will be provided with financial services as usual. The suspension will also exclude operations related to the public interest, such as the issuance of student ID cards. In the end, the suspension is expected to cost the 3 companies 100,000 clients a month and a combined 50 billion won or $47 million during the 3-month period. An official at the Financial Services Commission referred to it as the harshest penalty the firms could have received, not only because of the losses incurred, but because 3 months is the longest suspension allowed by law. The suspension is expected to be finalized by the FSC at a meeting on Sunday, and in the coming month, the FSC will also consider recommendations for dismissals of CEOs and executives deemed responsible for the leak. In related news, a suspension of telemarketing operations at financial and insurance companies put in place as a preventative measure at the end of last month was lifted on Friday, thanks to indemnity reports submitted by company executives. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Korea's public sector debt represented 64.5% of the nation's gross domestic product in 2012. The finance ministry said Friday that the total amount of debt owed by the central and provincial governments and non-financial state-run companies was over 820 trillion won, or roughly $770 billion in 2012. The ministry added that the debt figures represent new government data based on the latest international guidelines. The data excludes money borrowed by state-run financial companies like the Bank of Korea and the Korea Exim Bank. With the new data, the ministry said it is aiming to offer the public a clearer picture of the nation's public sector debt. The government will implement a new system that would allow local governments to declare themselves bankrupt. The Public Administration Ministry reported about the plan to President Bak on Friday, which aims to restore financial soundness of local governments. It will also hold local government heads responsible for their poor fiscal management rather than putting the burden on the people. Once a bankruptcy is declared, the central government or a higher level office will intervene to revive the local government's financial status. The ministry will also set up a task force to seek alternative means for personal identification rather than relying on resident registration numbers, which are most widely used here in Korea. This follows the largest ever personal data leak from credit card companies last month. Korea's finance minister says it's about time that domestic companies boost investment following a similar pitch to foreign companies. Finance Minister Hyun Oh-sak's comments came on Friday in a meeting with local business leaders in central Seoul. Hyun said Korea has distinguished itself from other emerging economies and that now is the time for domestic companies to expand investment. He added that the companies shouldn't wait for the financial instability in emerging markets prompted by the U.S. Federal Reserve's tapering of its stimulus program to pass before investing.
For your fill of Korean and international news, join Chae Yu-sun and Mark Broom every weekday at lunchtime.
To the Korea-U.S.
NEWSLINE at noon.
Plenary session this Wednesday and vote on the government restructuring bills.
The push to better promote the Korea name for the body of water that separates Korea and Japan is spreading in the United States. Following up on the success seen in the state of Virginia, New York is considering similar legislation. And one of the people behind this grassroots movement in Washington sat down with our Kim Han-il to explain how it all began.
54-year-old Peter Kim witnessed a moment that will go down in the history of Korean Americans. It all started 2 years ago with a conversation he had with his son, who was in 5th grade at the time.
I asked my son, Chris, do you know the sea between Korea and Japan? Yes, Daddy. What's the name of it? Sea of Japan. So I really got upset. And I told him that it's not true. It's EC, and you call it Tonghae. And he said, Daddy, you know, it's in the textbook. That's how I learned in schools.
That's when Peter decided to take action. He went on to form a group which later spearheaded a grassroots movement of Korean Americans in the D.C. metro area.
I mean, there were a lot of people coming from Washington area, driving 2 hours to Richmond. They had to get up 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, it's a cold weather here. You know, sometimes it was snowing, you know, but still, senior citizen people, they just, you know, wanted to go and show up at the General Assembly and pressure the Democratic, you know, the delegates and senators to vote for EC bill.
However, the long and arduous journey was far from easy.
The most difficult one was the House Education Subcommittee, 9 members. Governor McAuliffe's staff actually went to them to stop the bill, and they actually did, and it was a 4-4 tie. They had to vote again and barely passed in 5-4.
Although last week's victory in Virginia means the same law will be applied to 7 other states in the southeastern U.S., Peter Kim says his hopes do not stop there.
So the journey in Virginia has come to an end, but do you think this journey should stop or continue elsewhere?
I think it should continue. I did my part, and other Korean Americans should step up and stick together and continue this movement until 2017, where IHO meets, and hopefully IHO agrees on both names, EC and Sea of Japan.
Kim Han-il, Arirang News, Washington.
Now, today is Valentine's Day, a day for couples to tell or show their partners how much they love him or her. As well as enjoying this tradition, Koreans also consider February 14th to be of great historical significance, as this was the day in 1910 that one of Korea's most loved independence fighters was sentenced to death. Connie Kim reports.
February 14th may be an important day to remember for couples to exchange chocolates and cards. But a growing number of Koreans are calling for it to also be remembered as a day Korean independence fighter An Jung-geun was sentenced to death by the Japanese. An was executed for assassinating Ito Hirobumi, a four-time Prime Minister of Japan and former Resident General of Korea in the Chinese city of Harbin in October 1909. Efforts to commemorate An's death are being made offline and online. The Gyeonggi-do Provincial Office of Education has placed poster of An's famous left handprint in newspapers, informing people of the historical significance of February 14th. An cut his finger off to show his determination to make Korea an independent country. Koreans have also been taking to Facebook and Twitter to post comments raising awareness of the day. The Japanese government sentenced An to death on February 14, 1910, and he was secretly executed about 6 weeks later. An is a highly respected figure not only in Korea but also in China. A memorial hall honoring An opened in January in Harbin, the city where An shot down Ito. Hailed as a hero in Korea and China, An is less well remembered in Japan. Responding to news of the memorial hall, Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga called An a terrorist and expressed deep regret about Beijing's decision to approve the opening of the memorial hall. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The United States has slammed the release of 65 men from Afghanistan's Bagram detention center, saying the former prisoners pose a threat to security forces and civilians. U.S. forces said the move violates the terms of an agreement for the U.S. to hand over full control of the detention center to Afghanistan. The U.S. Embassy in Kabul said some of those released were responsible for the deaths of Afghan civilians and Afghan and coalition troops. And Afghan officials said they had taken the decision according to their own law and that they did not have enough evidence to keep holding the detainees. All of the men released had been behind bars since the agreement was reached in September 2012.
The OECD proposed Thursday a new system for cracking down on offshore tax evasion in a bid to improve financial transparency worldwide. The new global standard would require countries that are party to the agreement to collect and provide information about the investment income, financial assets, and bank balances of account holders who live outside of the country. The system is expected to be finalized during the upcoming meeting of G20 finance ministers slated for late February in Australia. The organization plans to implement the system by the end of next year. 42 countries, including Britain, France, and Germany, have already expressed their commitment to signing on to the plan. Belgium has become the first country in the world to permit euthanasia for terminally ill children of all ages. The lower house of parliament passed the bill Thursday with a vote of 86 to 44 and 12 abstentions. The bill now goes to the country's monarch to sign it into law. The bill allows children with terminal diseases to ask to end their lives, provided they have the consent of their parents and a psychiatrist or psychologist. The bill had broad support in Belgium, where euthanasia for adults was legalized in 2002. However, the bill has drawn fierce criticism from religious leaders, saying that children are not mature enough to make such difficult choices. In the neighboring Netherlands, euthanasia is legal for children over the age of 12 with parental consent. And on to a much lighter note, with the Sochi Winter Olympics in full swing, there is increased awareness about some winter sports that usually fly well under the radar here in Korea. For the plucky few that have picked the sports up, the lack of proper training facilities in Korea hasn't stopped them from becoming Olympians. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Skeleton racer Yoon Sung-bin only hopped on a sled a year ago. But before you know it, Yoon became the first Korean to qualify for the Olympics in the sport. For now, his goal is to place in the top 15. But going forward, he has even bigger dreams.
I'm looking at the long term for the Olympics, and to gain experience, I will try to show you my progress since the summer.
Korea's ski jump team failed to qualify for the final on the normal hill ski jump this week. But the athletes have put their disappointment aside and are now focused on qualifying for the large hill ski jump competition.
결승 올라가는 게 이제 30위까지잖아요. 30위까지
Up to 30th place gets to compete in the final, and our goals is to do just that. But personally, I would like to place in the top 10.
좋은 성적이 나오겠죠, 뭐.
Curling is another sport that did not get much love before. But the other day, Team Korea's ladies team shocked everyone by putting up a great fight against the number 1 seed, Sweden. Their record stands at 2 wins and 2 losses in Sochi, and they are scheduled to face China for the 5th round. The team needs 6 wins out of 9 preliminary round matches to win a ticket to the semifinals. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Well, after 6 days of competition in Sochi, Korea was able to win their 2nd Olympic medal, but it didn't come easy as South Korean short track star Hwang Sung-hee earned a bronze medal in the women's 500-meter short track event. And despite having the lead in the beginning of the final, 2 skaters behind her falls and takes her down as well as she struggles to recover from the fall. But after the judges ruled that Lise Christie of Great Britain tripped her, Pak was given an advance and earned a bronze medal. While it's far from a gold medal, Hwang Sung-hee claims Korea's first medal in the 500-meter short track event in 16 years. However, she has pulled out of the 1500-meter event after sustaining an injury in her bronze medal finish. And moving over to figure skating, where the defending champion Kim Hyun-ah, after arriving in Sochi, had her open practice session along with the other Korean figure skaters Kim Hae-jin and Park So-yeon. While her rivals in the sport, Mao Asada and Yulia Lipnitskaya, are practicing in nearby countries to keep their practices as closed as possible, the figure queen Kim Hyun-ah held her open practice session at the Olympic Park. And after holding her practice session, Kim Hyun-ah stated that she did not like the ice and will have to get used to the ice conditions. Meanwhile, the Vancouver gold medalist will be looking to defend her title next week. And shifting over to the women's 1,000-meter speed skating event, where after claiming her 2nd straight Olympic gold in the 500-meter event, Lee Sang-hwa enjoyed the 1,000-meter event and finished her Olympic competitions. With no pressure on her to win another medal in this event, Lee Sang-hwa stated that she enjoyed competing in the 1,000-meter event as she finished with a final time of 1 minute 15.94 seconds, good for 12th overall. Now, the 12th place finish is still a huge improvement from her Vancouver record when she finished in 23rd overall. And now over to curling, where the Korean women's curling team continues to wow everyone as they keep their semifinal hopes alive after beating Russia. In a must-win situation after losing to Switzerland and Sweden, the Korean women's curling team kept their composure throughout their match against Russia as they easily beat the 8th-ranked Russian side. And with their record now at 2-2, they will need to win their next 4 matches in order to keep their hopes alive as they're set to face off against the 5th-ranked China later today. And now finishing things off, let's take a look at the medal count after 6 days of competition in Sochi. Of course, taking a look here, what do you know? Germany with the most gold medals so far with 7, including 2 silvers and a bronze. Canada, Norway, the Netherlands, and the U.S. all with 4 gold medals each to complete the top 5, with Korea down in 13th place with 1 gold and 1 bronze so far. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great weekend, everyone, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Okay, now it's time to get a check on the weather with our Jian, who's standing by at the Weather Center. Hello there, Jian.
Good afternoon, Mark and Yusan. Well, today is Valentine's Day, but it's also 정월 대보름 here in Korea, which literally means the first full moon of the Lunar New Year.
Right, and one of our customs is going out to see the first moonrise and wishing for a bountiful year.
That's right, and thankfully sky will be fairly clear enough to see the moon tonight for most of us, and the weather will be also pretty mild, which will make it easier to be outdoors. But it will be a different story for people in the east because there will be quite a few lingering clouds in the sky. But thankfully the snow is gradually letting up in Gangwon-do, but there's another band of snow in store for next week. And over in Sochi, which is hosting Winter Games, it will be mostly sunny and warm with a high of 17 degrees Celsius. With that, here are the readings for Korea. The afternoon high in Seoul and Daegu will get up to 6, while Busan will top out at 7 this afternoon. And for other regions, it looks like Jeju will climb up to 9, Daejeon will rise to 7, while the top temperature on Mount Kumgang will be at -8. Now that's all for me this week, and let's send it back to Mark and Yusan in the studio.
Okay, thank you very much, Jian. And those are the stories we're following at this hour.
We'll be back here next Monday for Newsline at Noon. Join us then.